Okay, so as you can see, I've got the neck width, cut it out at the bandsaw, and then attached the templates, used it at the router table so that this outside width shape is fine. I also then laid out what the depth should be, rough cut that at the bandsaw. And made an adjustment on my design since I decided I wanted the headstock to have the same finish as the body. I went ahead and glued on a very thin, not even a 32nd of an inch piece of matching maple, drilled for tuners, and this also I had to cut out for the adjuster. Still is where I need to be for thickness on the headstock for the tuners, especially because I haven't done my final sanding. I've got it almost to thickness, but it'll need a little bit of adjustment. So the next piece then is to get this to, and you can see the layout lines, it's just taking a little bit off, but I want to get it to the depth that I want. And then I'm going to use, it's already in the router, so you'll see it in a second, but I'm just using a regular mortising bit for that. And then I use a 7/8 inch roundover bit for starting the profile of the neck. It basically ends up giving me kind of a graduated from a perfectly rounded kind of D shape at around the nut and to the first, second fret, slightly flattening to a C shape as you go up the neck. I find it personally quite comfortable, and people who played my guitar seem to think the same thing. Much of the shaping is done by hand, but this really gets the initial kind of center block laid out the way I want it, the correct taper, the correct roundover, and so on. To be honest, I can do it by hand with a rasp and file just about as quickly, but this is dead accurate and doesn't kill the arthritis in my shoulders. I run a taper so that the neck is from about the 1st fret to the 12th fret, about a 3/32 of an inch thicker. So a little thinner down here, a little thicker up here. And the way this jig works is, so my router is mounted to this sled. You can see there's my mortising bit. You can see these stops here. What that does is, it keeps me from cutting into the jig itself. I can only run it along the work piece. But I need to know where I'm going to stop up here, where I'm going to stop at the heel. The little jig I have for the headstock side this is actually from a old toilet seat, but they're great because they're nylon. They don't do any damage to the tuner holes. And let me unscrew this a little. You can see there's even a little piece of felt, so I don't bother it. So I've got these little pieces of T-track, and then the T-track nut so that I can adjust this. This will fit, so it goes just underneath where the tuner hole goes. This goes through the tuner hole, screws into here. So this side, and you can see it's a matching 12-degree block to the back of the headstock. On this side, again, I'll still have this centered. It'll sit about like that. I've just swung this out of the way. I literally just screw this into the heel of the neck, which will be hidden in the neck pocket anyway. So this thing won't be going anywhere. It allows me to do both the depth, get that even, and then the round over. The last thing I'll say is if you're going to make a jig like this is, you'll notice I've left this part of the template on. I don't need the headstock one. It's because, I'll use this one for an example. This is going to run like this. So you see the bearing would run along the body. As it goes down, it actually goes below the top of the fretboard. So I need to have this, which is, since I use this as this was the template for it, it's exactly even. It allows me to get all the way down to here with the bearing riding on the template. Okay, so you can see I've got this now attached. So I've got on the headstock side, I've got that angled support block with the nylon screw right through the tuner. This part's tight. This headstock, that's not going anywhere. The whole thing is also clamped to the table. This side, there's 2 screws going right into the bottom of the heel, which will be hidden when it's glued into the guitar. So this whole thing is really solid. Another thing I should mention is that in order to do this, this has to sit perfectly level. So I made sure that the truss rod wasn't, bending the neck up or down, that it was just a dead flat adjustment on the truss rod. For this one, I'm just going to run back and forth, up and down, to get this where I want it to be before I do the round over. Okay, so I've got it all leveled out, getting ready to do the round over. See, I've got my 7/8 inch round over bit, and I'll do a pass on one side, go the other side until I get it where I want. The key here is to do it in shallow passes. Take your time. This way you won't get any tear out, because you definitely don't want to have tear out on your neck. As I was doing that, I was taking off about 1 millimeter or 3/32 roughly per pass. This allows me to avoid any kind of chip out, and especially when I get down to the last few passes, so I get it right where I want it to be. Obviously, I've got some handwork to do here, finish the round over and the transition, and get rid of this. Some guitars I'll have a little volute there. This one is just going to be a smooth transition. And at the heel the same way. This is the line of the actual, when it's glued in, where the body will be. And I like to have a little bit, 1/4 of an inch or so to play with. So this will be sanded into a transition up to that. And I don't know, I'll get it as close as I can so maybe you can see it, is basically this, so there you can see the headstock. The nut would be right here. So from the nut to, would be the 1, 2, to about the 3rd fret is perfectly rounded D-shaped neck. And then right here, if I get it really close, you may be able to see it. It's hard to see it as you go along towards the heel. You definitely will be able to see it at the heel. You see this little strip, you can see the different color. That's not even the thickness of a piece of paper, where the round over, because of as the neck gets wider, it isn't perfectly a D shape. It's just a slight C shape, slightly flattened at the top here. And again, that'll all be done by hand with file and sandpaper. Okay, here I am at the drill press, getting ready to drill for the side marker dots, fret marker dots. There aren't going to be any face position markers, dots, inlays, anything on this base. I've left at the moment. The template is still there. It just gives me a little extra straight support against the fence here on the drill press. I need to locate where I'm going to put the position dots. So I've made chalk marks just so I'm going to put the dots in the right places. Then I'll just use a ruler here, measure to the center, draw a straight line so I know where all the spots are going to be. And then I use the fence to line this up so that I get that nice even line of marker dots so that it doesn't, wave up and down. Okay, so let me do a couple of these just to show you. This is for the 5th fret. And I'm deliberately moving this up here. And I like to use the millimeter side. That's 34. So half is 17. 17 is right here. So you can see that there's a little mark there. And I'm going to continue and mark the rest of this and then drill it out. I've got all my locations marked, and an astute observer will see that I've actually changed out which fence I'm using. It's easier with the lower fence spacing because what I use is this little spacer board, because otherwise, because of the taper, this wouldn't be level, especially once I start going off the edge of this drill press table. So in order to keep this level and even, I use that little backer board. So I've got it aligned, let me get my elbow out of the way, where I want it. I want this to, the drill bit to be just, if you will, north of where the neck and the fretboard meet. This neck is going to be radiused to a 12-inch radius. So if I put it too far towards the top, those little dots would get shaved down, if you will, when I radius the board. So I want to be sure that they're nice and clean even after the board is radiused. Not that these all have to be equally deep, but obviously you don't need to drill down an inch, just need maybe 1/8 of an inch. A little hint here with these really thin drill bits is to chuck them so that there's just enough showing to do the job. Otherwise they may wander a bit. So I now got the fret marker holes. Next thing is to glue them in. So you've got the holes drilled for the fret marker dots. Here's what I'm using. Standard 3/32 inch fret marker dot rod. And I've got a couple of extra tools here. And a little bit of acetone with an eyedropper. The type of plastic that this material is made out of, much like most binding, acetone will melt. And it literally turns the plastic into like a glue. So you don't need glue. You could use, I guess, if you really wanted to, some CA glue. All I need to do is, the nice part about this is it doesn't at all affect the finish adversely. So then I can just put that in there. It went in pretty well, but I have a little hammer just in case. And I'm going to snip that off just above the surface. When this dries, I can go back and just sand it off. And I can go back and do the rest of these. Done. Just take a few minutes for that to dry, and I can sand them down a little. Getting ready to do the handwork on the neck profile. So you can see I've got it on my little jig here, my little stand, the angled piece for the headstock, and my various implements of destruction here. So I've got Japanese, some people call it a file, some people call it a rasp. It's a little bit of both. A little more traditional hand, hand struck, I guess is the right word, hand struck rasp with a flat, very slight curve to that and a bigger curve on that side. Regular woodworking files with a flat side and a curved side in what's called second cut, and then fine cut card scraper. And this is one of my favorite secret weapons. These are literally cut from both pieces of PVC piping, old caulk tubes, so I get different radius. There's some flexibility, you can see, but it allows me to put the sandpaper on the inside, and when I cup it with my hand, it gives me a perfectly smooth rather than a kind of a weird shape. Some people just put the sandpaper in their hand. This is a little piece like this, but your hand isn't perfectly round, and it can give you uneven results. So I like to use, like I said, various pieces of this, and that's what I do most of my final shaping with. The two big this will require very little work. The two big areas are the transition here from the headstock to the neck shape, and then here at the heel, the transition. I'm going to knock these down a little bit at the spindle sander. I'm not really going to do the final shaping there, but it just, removes some of that excess wood quickly. All right, ready to start doing the handwork. And I'll start up here. I've zoomed in a bit, and I'm just going to have a slight semicircle transition. And here's my high-tech tools for doing that. I have all different size washers. This actually has to be the whole container. Just put it there, drew it around. I'm not worried about whether it's perfect or not yet, but that gives me a guide, a little pencil guide as I'm working. And I'm going to start with my Iwasaki Japanese file. And I'm using deliberately, if you find the end here, you can see it's this side, there's nothing. It's safe edges. And this gives me very precise control to get this rounded over. It's just like hundreds of little razor blades. A lot of my favorite tools, really my finger ends. I can feel if there's like right there where it jumps up, and depending on the shape, which tool I want to use. So I'll go back and forth often at this stage between the Japanese file and standard Nicholson wood file. And again, this one, you can see it's kind of that semicircular shape with a flat edge and the curved edge. In this case, this becomes my reference edge, so I can use the flat edge so I can watch to see when it just starts to touch what's already been shaped. And I'm doing a kind of a rounded motion. You can probably see this, the two little notches here. That was what the roundover bit did. So I know that's where I have to come down to. And this little section here is going to be just a slight little rise. And again, the guide is less what it looks like than what it feels like. Okay, that's roughed in pretty well. You can see how quick that goes. And what I'll do now is I'm literally going to take the whole thing. I don't want to try to work on this side, so I'm literally going to flip this whole thing around in the vise. Okay, now I can do this side. Same process. Okay, not done, but I think you can see that the basic shape is there. You probably can't tell, which is a good thing, even though this isn't completely smoothed out. Don't forget, this was a scarf joint. When this was glued up, that I aligned the laminations perfectly. There's actually a joint right here. If I look really close, I can see where that joint goes right across like this. I'm going to start the handwork on the heel transition. The simplest way people will do this, and I just think of it as squared off and just round it. This is how the body joins the neck. So that if you think of it from the player's position, this is the top, the bass strings, if you will, and this is the treble string side, the underneath side. From a player's perspective, it comes down, so there's better access to those last frets. So I don't want to have this big block up here. That's why I've started to curve it that way. And I want it to end up being just about like that. But same general technique as what I did at the headstock end. I'm going to get in there with a rasp and a second cut file and start to shape that down. Great little thing to have. Get this under the camera there. It's just a little soft wire brush. Cleans the teeth out of the rasps and the files. I'm working on this side. This is where the body is. And I'm trying to stay a little bit this way. You can see here's that little mark from the roundover bit. I've got to get rid of that, bring that around. This is where having a file of rasp that has a safe edge on it is really handy, because I can end around a convex shape. It allows me to let the file make the shape, but as I come around like this, if I can go like this, it's not going to make a mark where I don't want it, just where the teeth are. So I'm going to let the file create the transition curve. Okay, swap over. Now this I have to be a little more careful. I still have, this is that second cut Nicholson file. I still have the convex shape, but this side is not a safe side, so I've got to be careful not to dig that corner in. I got to keep it lifted up a little bit. And again, you know what? Just to be on the safe side, let's go to my little mini round. Can't rush it. Okay. Both the headstock to neck transition and the heel block to neck transition are first really roughed in with the router and spindle sander, and then I come back, as you saw, with a rasp and Japanese file and second cut file and cut them pretty close. There's still probably 1/64 of an inch of wood to take off and smooth it in a complete transition. I'll do that now, if you will, part and parcel with getting this completely smooth. There are a couple, like right here, you won't see it, but you can feel it. And if you play guitar, you know exactly what I mean. As your hand, it's hard to, you know, I'm not in a playing position, but imagine I was. Especially as your hand goes up or down the neck, if there's any little, there is right here, any little bump, I'm thinking about it here, I literally just do this. That reminds me, oh yeah, take a double look at that spot. And another little one right around in here, where there might have been a little defect in the template or router bit jumped slightly, is you wouldn't see it even up close, but your fingers are so sensitive to that kind of change. Other than that, it just feels, especially up in here, just because of the way the grain is, there's just some natural roughness that needs to be sanded back. And as I do that, I'm just making myself some, as I'm doing this. This side actually is really close, but I can look at this now and know where I'm going with it. So now it just becomes patient, slow go, filing, sanding, double checking it. I will take it off the jig and literally sit in a playing position and just see how does it feel in my hand. Do I need to thin it down a little more? Is there a rough spot? All that type of thing. So even without any finish, I want it to feel comfortable. So I can do this and it'll give me a nice, even, smooth sand. And especially just that little bit left by the router here, that will come off very quickly. What my finger felt now by running you just saw those first few passes. Since this is, it feels straight, I can now visually see, because of what got sanded and what didn't, see what looks like these light lines. That's because that was the high spot where the sandpaper hit more than here. And again, there's a little spot right here, see the line? And again, where I circled it, you can see that little line there. And again, it's my finger felt it first, and then running the sandpaper, just those couple of passes confirmed, yep, there's a little high spot there that just needs to get knocked down with the sandpaper. This is now where you've got that scarf joint, you know, that was at an angle. That's what's showing now. I'm going to slowly work that back so that it's hidden in the curve. And that's just patience. That's really what it comes down to. Right here, see that little dark circle? There actually was a knot or an imperfection in the wood, but you couldn't see it on the outside of the blank. It wasn't until the shape got cut out that that imperfection showed. They don't bother me if it's not structural. It's kind of like a beauty mark, if you will. Makes the instrument unique. But I have to be aware of it because it's going to sand and file differently than this. But that's the kind of thing you never know what will pop up when you start to shape a piece of wood. It's like taking a block of granite and you're going to make a sculpture. The guitar neck kind of appears out of that block of wood. So I've been working on this headstock transition. And the easy one is, I have all these little scrap blocks, so it's perfectly smooth. With this case, it's got some 120 grit between this and a card scraper. It's just to keep this level, take that last little bit off. You see this mark right here? This is again where the neck and the headstock scarf joint is. So it's going to come up like this because of the curve of the neck. Now here it's just this weird raggedy looking thing because I haven't finished that yet. One of the easiest ways is, this is a P120 sandpaper. I just folded it over so I can get a narrow piece. I may even fold it one more time. And it'll literally go like this. It'll create an I'll have to get rid of the scratch marks, but it gives me a nice, I'm going to fold it one more time. So that's maybe 1/2 inch. And I keep looking. This does two things. One is it shapes that into this, and it also smooths this out. And so I'm going to go like this a little bit to help the transition back to the main part of the neck. So you should see now is how this is quite defined. It's kind of cathedral semicircle. So now I'm back to this, and it's just to smooth this out. This is 150 grit, and I'll do it again with 220. I want to get it nicely, evenly sanded. Where this is uniformly light, until you get to about here, and you can see this strip that's a little shinier and darker. That's because some of that is where, remember, this part of the neck is a little flatter than this, but I'm going to keep working at it until that disappears. You can see I'm just starting to touch the little bit was left here by the router, and then it's low, but I mean you can barely finish it, and then it rounds over. By doing this, I'm completing that round over. So you'll see this disappear as I do this. Still see it a little bit, and I can speed that up with the card scraper. This one's got a really good edge to it, and because it's convex, just a small amount touches this, so I can control how much I'm actually wants to go with the grain this way, just to get that top little bit. You can feel it. Okay. And then back to the start to see now it's moving back, and I'm just starting to get this. Got this one last little section here. And what may not be apparent is my main motion is this way with the grain, but I'm also, as I do it, I'll rotate it a little bit to be sure I'm going all the way down to the edge of the fretboard, as well as the middle, and then getting it that way. Another thing you can, I'm thinking of as I just saw it, I would use a wider one than this. I'll tear off a new piece in a second. If you don't have something to make these concave sanding shapes, you can take a strip of sanding paper, just the way I did it up there, except you're going this way with it. Okay, so here's just a strip of sandpaper. This is 120. And again, if I'm holding it down like this, pulling down, it's creating that semicircle that I want so that I have an even radius. And you can also kind of go like that, which will transition it. There's nothing like a fresh piece of sandpaper to get the job done. And I'll go ahead and sand this to 220 right now. That's not quite, it's not quite finish ready, but it gives me a really good sense of the feel in my hand when I take it off the jig, and lets me really feel any low spot, high spot, anything that I need to come back and touch. And generally I'll actually let this will sit for a few days anyway, but I like to let them sit for a few days. Wipe it down lightly with water, not soap, but just a damp paper towel. Raises the grain so I can get it smooth, which is a finish prep technique, but it also, again, lets me really feel and see any high-low spots. Then I'll come back again and use either alcohol, naphtha, mineral spirits, something that very dramatically lets me see, oh, I missed a spot. There's a pencil mark I missed, something like that, would be buried in the sanding dust. This isn't finish ready, but it's completely shaped and sanded to 220. Reveal here for both of us. We've got some naphtha here. These are squeeze bottles you can buy Amazon or even other stores. They're for like ketchup and mustard and mayonnaise and things, but works great for solvents in the shop. I'm just going to wipe this down. I also get some sense of what it's going to look like because I'm either going to have no dye or just a little bit of dye.